Hello, thank you for being here. I'm the initiator of PropTechNL. PropTechNL is a cross-industry network, and our mission is to reinvent the future of real estate. So what we do is to bring individuals and the group further, to develop them, to make connections with the right people, so we can push the boundaries to do real projects in real life. So that's what we are focused on.
Okay. Great. My name is Jan-Willem Jeucken. As Richard tells you, I am a regional solutions manager for Yardi. I've been doing that for a year now. And Yardi, in case you don't know us yet, we are a US-based software firm in property management, asset management and investment management. And we've been doing that over 35 years right now, and we are always looking for more and more innovation. And actually that's the reason why I joined Yardi, because I'm really enthusiastic about all the possibilities that we're going to have in the next coming years, because I think we are at the verge of a revolution in the industry right now.
Do you think it's an evolution or a revolution? There's been a significant amount of changes, not only in Yardi actually, which was previously just seen as a back office software function, and increasingly being seen more as a sort of data information company, I guess. How do you see that revolution actually taking place, and what's your sense of how that's going to impact the real estate sector?
Well, I think that for now we've been much more focused on the evolution. We've been doing the same processes at a different way. How can we do this more time efficient? How can we do this faster? How can we do this cheaper? That's what we've been doing all these years. But I think with the technology that's available right now, I think we're standing at the verge of a revolution, because I think, for instance, when you look at Airbnb or Uber, they use just this part of technology, and the rest is creativity. And I think the technology we have been that's around right now gives us the opportunity to do a different kind of business, but we need the creativity to find out how to use the technology in the business. I think that's going to make us revolutionary in the next coming years. Okay, good.
And I'm going to set a rule as well for the panel, as well as everybody else, which is you don't need to ask me if you've got a question or contribution you want to make, just make it. And Menno, so we've seen some of the technology, catalyst for change, disruptor. How much of that do you think is also bringing different opportunities? And it'd be interesting to pick up that from you as well, Kai, just from your perspective from the real estate sector. But start with you, Menno.
I see a lot of new opportunities. Of course, it's automation about the process who was already done. But you also see new services. Before we start the meeting, I was telling about connecting different startups with each other, and they are making new propositions, or they bring new services to the market. So you see technology, you can it will help you, but there are a lot of opportunities about new services. You see the client is changing, they want different things. You see the whole development of as a service, space as a service. It's not about a long stay, a 10-year, but you fly in and you fly out. You see that also on the residential market. You see the hotel for a day or a night, but you also see the mid-range. So there is different things are going on right now. Also for property management, asset management. You can automate the process, but I think it's good to rethink about asset management and property management, because you can do it 10 times faster, cheaper and better.
And that's interesting. In terms of the real estate sector, Kai, you mentioned, so you didn't quite say it, but that it's a bit of a dinosaur in terms of its uptake of exactly the things that Ajay's been talking about. Do you think that there's going to be a quick shift in real estate? Do you think real estate is going to have to take all of these things on board quickly? What's your sense of it, or do you think there will be a gradual kind of...
From past experiences, I would be inclined to say it's going to be more gradual, because there's just so much around. But I think very much it depends on how how quickly things are happening now and how stable they are. Why am I saying the gradual part? Because I see, sort of, like you said, rightly so, the real estate area not being the most advanced if I compare that to other asset classes, right? I mean, it's still very manual. Automation is not very advanced yet. So these things will take time. But if I take the example of blockchain, for example, that Ajay mentioned earlier on, if this whole contracting, etc., will work and is trustworthy, then it can be improved in a snap of seconds. So the whole back and middle office elements will be gradual, because there's just a lot of work to be done in order to automate all of that. But if there is the right technology, such as blockchain, that is coming along, then on certain elements like transactional data, etc., it can go very quickly.
Okay, good. Yeah.
There is a movement. I thought it was it's UK countrywide. That's a big broker, and you have Purple Bricks, and they are the new company. But countrywide, the last 12 or 16 months, the stocks went down 50%, and Purple Bricks was growing 200%. So something is going on, and it takes time. And of course, you have the assets, and you have the clients, and in between you have platforms, and it costs time to make the ecosystems. So the WeWork, they have different places, but they also acquire the platform for constructing. That could be they have money and they can construct, so they could be a disruptor for the construction industry. But it depends what they're going to do. So.
And do you think, Kai, that also means they could be a disruptor for the investment industry as well? I.e., will they then choose to, let's say they potentially choose to construct. There's no requirement then to have an investor, so they could simply construct, use their own money to invest, and use their own systems to lease, therefore cutting out a large part of the market.
It could happen, but in the end, real estate will never work without investors going forward, because it's just too large a market, and you need investment money somewhere. But a part of it, i.e., the whole, I would say more the whole financing part, could be cut out in this case. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Indeed, like if I look at least from my little understanding of the sector, but from the technology train, there was a big technology train which is like the crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. This is where I see the industry already moving ahead, actually, where you don't need to be asset managers, but like crowdfund created through millions of people, and putting like as low as like $500 actually into real estate, and there's the returns over there. Yeah. So I think like those are the, again, like from a technology perspective, there will be evolution coming in, and revolution coming rather, and once it picks up, like it's much faster actually for adoption.
And it's quite interesting, Jan-Willem. We've obviously, all of us, seen quite a lot of changes in our own personal lives, whether that's to do with entertainment, whether that's to do, what's happening in terms of your expectations of speed of being able to search. I mean, I'm, old enough to remember working without having a computer at all. And then being excited. What I'll do is I'll demonstrate to you, and this is going to be me standing now for about 4 hours whilst waiting for an internet connection. Yeah. So things have changed actually quite quickly over a relatively short space of time in comparison to what was there before. And I'd be interested just to know how much that's changed your business, because obviously now mobile phones have made a huge difference. The amount of technology that can be held on something that is that small. The expectations, I think, of people to receive information, whether that's, turn your heating on from outside your house or whatever it might be. How much has that changed your business, and how do you see that heading?
It's changed the business enormously. As you mentioned earlier, in the past, Yardi has been seen as a back office system, accounting system. But nowadays we are much more focused in our development on the source of the transaction. So with a mobile phone or a mobile device, property management is different now, because property managers will just walk around the building and see, well, there's some mold on the ceiling and we need to fix this. They'll just pull out his mobile phone and make a picture of it and send in the service request, and it's getting picked up. And at the backhand, a vendor might be able to pick up that same service request and put in the pick up the request, make it happen mobile, because he's right there, maybe in the building, or he's 10 kilometers away. So it's really making the business different. So it changed us as well, because we are focusing on the front end right now and not so much on the back end, because the back end will gradually move away, as Kai said. I'm absolutely sure about that. I think maybe it's hard to say over here at EY, because I'm very curious about what blockchain might be, what it might mean for the industry, for auditing firms, for banks also.
Yeah.
So are those going to be obsolete in the next coming 10 to 15 years?
Yes.
Might be.
Possibly so, which will bring new challenges, because a lot of this sort of manual work is done by more junior resources. So if they're all being taken away by blockchain, then how are we going to find managers and up? Because the juniors, seniors are going to be trained into managers one day. And if we don't have the training anymore, how are we going to find managers? So it'll create new issues. And the same for the banks, for the depositories, the custodians, etc. Coming back quickly to the point, how does this whole mobility, etc. change? Very concretely in this building, for example, we moved in here a year and a half ago, and we went totally paperless. So maybe you shouldn't see this printout. I'm going to be like, anyways. But what's the reason for that? The reason is because we use the building as such more efficiently. We have got all open space. We don't have dedicated desks. So in the morning, people walk into this building and they sit wherever there's a free desk. Now, for that, you obviously can't have paper, because you can't rag around, or rucksacks full of your files. You just have it on your PC. And that allows us and enables us to probably reduce overall office space. I don't know the percentage, to be honest, but it's not unconsiderable, because a part of us, EY, are always at the client. It's not always the same people, but it's a group of, I don't know, let's say 10%, which are always at the client. Hence, you don't need a desk here. Hence, we can reduce. So these are very concrete measures as well, how things like iPads, PCs, etc. Make us evolve as well in the real property sense.
Okay, good. Yeah.
How smart is this building? I challenge you probably, but can you see which room is used so they make it clean, or
we don't have rooms no more. That's the point. Apart from these,
this is all.
Rooms.
Okay.
If you go on the first, second, third, fourth floor, you can walk all around. There's no rooms,
okay.
Right? So it's really all open space.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being cleaned once a day in the evening, because then everybody is out. But other than that, coming back how smart it is definitely extremely green. It's one of the most green buildings in Luxembourg. There's probably more evolution in terms of smartness of buildings, because new technology comes up every day, and this is now already a year and a half old. But yeah.
And Ajay, one of the things that I just wanted, I was in a session last week at EPRA where there was Gartner's hype cycle, which I thought was quite good, which just shows a bit like VHS and Betamax, which one was going to win. Though you'd got a lot of excitement about Betamax, and then almost no excitement about Betamax because nobody bought it. Don't believe the hype is my question here, only because it allows me to get in a song title from Public Enemy, which is very rare that I can achieve that. What's your sense of how many of the things that are currently being talked about will actually come through and make a direct impact on the real estate sector?
How many things by number?
Blockchain, for example, you can see has gone past that point where actually you can see a practical reality for it.
Yeah. So again, I think there's a investment, the initial investment innovation which is being spent on all those technologies, especially on the blockchain, IoT. So again, these things are not new, they're not being just researched yesterday. Actually, they've been going on for a number of years. However, the industry is also looking at how it could be applied to different sectors actually, right? The innovation, how you can apply, and more trust you build, the more trust you can apply to the other sectors actually, right? So blockchain is applying, getting that trust definitely. So it's getting there. So it will be a success, I think so. clearly in next 18 months there will be a lot of projects happening. EVA is like globally I can see a lot of traction on the blockchain where EVA is helping as well. So clearly one area actually. Similarly, I think like for property, like IoT, the sensors, like these are really some of the new things which is going to happen, and I can see in some buildings they are already deploying. More from a factor of like the building are getting smart, but also like people wants some health information like how's oxygen over here actually, right? And this information is like driven by the customer demand rather than what would be the benefit out of it. So again, these technologies I think like will move forward very fast actually.
Okay, good. And
please object to the hype cycle, because I don't believe it's a hype. I think it's real. The change is real, and the change is now. And the change is going to get exponentially faster in the next coming years with new people stepping into the workplace, with different people, digital natives stepping into the workplace. That's going to change the world, I believe.
And in terms of the practical reality of what you're doing day to day, Jan-Willem, how are people? Has there been a change in how investors, investment managers are now using your services? So, for example, just the sheer collection of data that presumably wasn't possible 10 years ago. Is that something that's now being... We've already heard here that there's chances to make the buildings more efficient, which changes then, how efficient that building can be, what the costs are, and changes the investment to a certain degree. How much are people using that for efficiency, and how much are people using it to actually begin to drive some of the investment decisions?
I think they're using it for both. Definitely for investment decisions and operationally as well. And how do I see that in my job? Well, most of my clients or prospects will ask for different things than they've been asking for the last couple of years, because the reporting that they're asking for now is different, because they know there's huge amounts of data available right now. And if it's available, people want to know. So, funny thing at Yardi is we have huge amounts of data about properties, leases, buildings, etc. And we wish we could use them all right now, but we just can't. So therefore, we have an office in Romania which contains a lot of people who are just collecting real estate data and are giving those data back to our clients. It's now a US thing. We call it Yardi Matrix, because a lot of real estate data in the US is much more widely available than it is over here. But we can benchmark a building to the next building. What's the rents in building X compared to building Y? And what's the difference? And why is there a difference? The funny thing is, when we show that in the US, a lot of clients will ask us, well, show me what you have on our buildings. And we show it and they're amazed and they're thinking, really? How do you know this? Well, it's public available information. And it's on platform X, platform Y, and platform Z. But everybody's holding the data over here in Europe right now. Whereas I think the most advantage will be in connecting the different platforms together to make sure that you don't have 5 pillars of information, of data, but you have 50 or maybe 500 or maybe 5,000. And when you have more data available to make your investment decision, your decision will be better.
And this is because in the States there's more transparency, there's more sharing of data.
Absolutely.
And is this something that Kai, you think, obviously EY, a big operation in the States, so is that something that, what's holding that back in Europe, and is that likely to change?
I think it's the mentality, partially regulation, but mainly the mentality of saying, my data is my data. But once the different data holders see a use for themselves in a different way, then they're more likely as well to give that data away. And I perfectly agree with Jan-Willem. I spoke to somebody recently who said, we want to build this whole data mart as well, and we're sitting on piles of data from clients of ours. But instead of going to ask them one by one, are we allowed to use your data and you get something out of it, etc., they said this is way too burdensome right now, and they also go for public sources. I think it's just something that needs to change in the mindset of the people to say, I hold on to my data because it's mine, rather to say, I want the benefit out of it ultimately, and therefore I have to give a little bit of that.
I think we should add a buzzword to the discussion. I think the sharing economy is going to make a huge impact on the industry.
Yeah.
And nowadays, a lot of advisors hold on to their data because that's their value. That's what they're adding to the world. But I think the value added could be a lot bigger when people are sharing their data.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is also a big challenge with Europe. It's Europe, not many countries. Yeah. So I think we have a volume of data which is certainly much bigger than you would have in the US. I mean, if you look at the fund structure in the US, it's a trust that holds the properties. Here we have funds that collect money from investors, and then you have 25 SPVs, and then obviously you have things happening between the SPVs, so then you have a volume of data which is much bigger, and in different directions, and you need to get everyone talking with each other, and I think this as a challenge. I also see a trend from investors, and what is getting international as well is the investor community. And what they see in the US, they don't understand why they don't get it in Europe. And I see also a big pressure from investors and from coming from investors to the managers to shift their approach, because investors, they want, and this is a new trend, is transparency. So they want to, they want to have the information fast, and they want to have transparency. You look through and say, okay, I want to be able to manipulate my self data by accessing your system. So there will be also from coming from investors some pressure there.
Okay, so pressure from the investors as well as from outside.
Yeah, it's really interesting. They organize different, but when the industry doesn't create it, PropTech companies create it. We have a Dutch company, Geofy, and a lot of companies use it, and they have open data. They use open data, and there are a lot of banks who make their decisions about the data. So they say, okay, this is the portfolio, these are bad, and that's very sustainable, and we want to invest in sustainable. So they use, for example, Geofy to make the decisions. Are we going to invest, yes or no? We bring the money, or we don't bring the money to the market. So it's really interesting, and if we don't do it, other companies will.
And Jan-Willem, in terms of that investment decision, are you seeing that as well? I mean, what we've just talked about there, that US companies who are used to that transparency are putting pressure on investment managers here, or brokers here, or whoever it might be, to provide that same level of transparency.
Oh, absolutely. I think that investors are asking for it, as the gentleman right here tells you. It's a good position for Yardi to be in, because we have the system in place for this. We have wide variety of data available within one connected solution. So I think that's a good opportunity for us at this moment. We see a lot of international companies calling us, and what a lot of prospects of mine tell me is that so we don't know Yardi yet, but we really have to get acquainted, because investors will tell us, you can manage our property or you can manage our money when you do it on the Yardi platform.
And do you think there's going to be a move? I mean, previously a lot of the data was coming, banks had a great deal of data in terms of the lending side, and the agents had a lot of data in terms of the valuations, or then the deal pricing and the leasing pricing. And the majority of that asset management, property management side was slightly different. But do you see now, I mean, you were saying that you've got a huge amount of data. Do you see now that kind of more asset management, property management platforms having more of the data that people want, and that may be changing then where the power of the data is between the brokerage side and the rest of the side in the investment scene?
I'm really curious about how many brokers we will see in the next 10 to 15 years, because I believe that that's also going to be a job that's going to be obsolete. I don't think we don't see it. I wouldn't let my daughter to become a real estate agent right now. I wouldn't recommend it to her.
It's one of the highest of the list of the Oxford study about automated was going to disappear. I think it will change. The role will change. So it disappear how it's right now.
But probably that's one of the reasons also acceptance, right? Like if you have all the data available, that means like a lot of current jobs and current businesses or revenue models get disrupted as well, actually. And that's where the the adoption index really varies between the the different sectors as well, actually.
Yeah, we were talking about property managers before the meeting started.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a good story to tell about that we believe that property managers nowadays, It's your story. You tell the story. I'm not telling your story.
Don't feel obliged.
Yeah, and there's no point just telling Jan-Willem in the coffee beforehand, share it.
I was doing a project and we were thinking about how can we create property asset management 10 times faster, cheaper, better. But you see that activity is in the future will be 50% of your activities. So the other 50% will be services like mobility, like energy, like fitness, like food or something like that. So you see a lot of platforms also in that way to connect with APIs. I don't know if that's the right way, but so things are changing. So when you have data, and I know we work, for example, again, they have their building, and that's as a service. But they know about data that their areas to have meetings are too big because of the data. So they will change it. But they also change what's inside the building, the furniture and that kind of things because of the data. They also have the platform so people can connect. They have the ecosystem, so they know what the user wants to use or what they want. So you see, it's not only about the bricks. I always say you have the robust bricks and the agile bits, and they are connecting now. So you have two different cultures. It's some sort of, I always joking like it's a clash of clans, the game. But if you don't know, you don't know. But yeah, there's a big game. But it's a clash of cultures. But they're also connected, and they're getting more and more connected. So the asset and property manager, it will be more like a service manager. Future.
Yeah, dealing with the tenant experience, because when you have a smarter building, the building will have sensors in it, and the building will know, well, this is Jan-Willem driving in today, and he drives this kind of car, and this car needs fixing by then and then, because there's sensors in the car as well. Well, we're not even talking about self-driving cars right now, but that's a whole different ball game, I would say. But a smarter building will have sensors, and they will know, well, Jan-Willem always has a meeting over there, and he drinks his coffee like that. So there's no person that will ask me again, how would you like your coffee and what time will you need it? Now it's just going to be there because the building knows my behavior. And when we connect the different platforms to each other, you'll have more data, so you'll have more sophisticated data available to make better decisions or have a better tenant experience.
I was joking about it. It's for the pin, and it says, you already bought too many shoes. So that's the smart retail, for example.
Oh, I can't have that.
And I want to push the boundaries a little bit. I talked with one of the biggest investors in Holland, and they are talking about, okay, we build houses, and the construction company builds them, but they know the building better than the property or asset manager. So they are now piloting about, can we make a platform so the construction company will do the service right there, but that also means things for the construction industry because they have to develop their employees to be more serviced instead of being, okay, I have to make the light or
yes.
So it's also a changing of behavior in that kind of companies, but they cut away the property manager. They use them, but they also do pilots without property managers. So it will be the user, because they are thinking, okay, when the user, client pays and is satisfied, he stays longer, it will bring more value to our funds or something like that. So you have the user, the platform, and the owner. And in between, it will be a struggle, a fight, find new roles, that kind of things. That's pushing the boundaries.
We mentioned a little bit about the sharing economy. Kai, and in a lot of the things that we've been doing lately, because we're covering across all the sectors, in retail, but also actually in e-commerce and logistics, and now also in office, people are beginning to use the words that are related to previously the hospitality industry. So that you're not an occupier, you are a guest. You are not a shopper, you are a guest. So all of these kinds of things about treating people in a different way, so that you're not a tenant. You are more than that. And obviously in retail, in some ways, because of the e-commerce side, they've had to create a new reality for themselves as a destination, so that you go there not just to shop. And you can see that now in, as I was talking to Tim earlier, about a lot of the shopping centres are moving their food and beverage, rather than it being next to the toilets at the back, and really not something you want to eat. You would only do it if you were absolutely desperate, to now having really good food and beverage, and that's expected to create a large part of their revenue. Do you see that happening for other areas? For example, like maybe offices, you will begin to make more from having the right food offers for the types of tenants or guests that you've got, those kinds of things, so that actually revenue generation happens in a different way from selling on value-add services.
It's maybe a tiny example, but it is again a concrete one down here. As UI, we don't have a canteen, for example, in the building. However, we've got two restaurants at the bottom, one which is canteen-like, so it has, let's say, affordable food, and they actually got the task when they open up that they have to have every day a different menu, which is not more expensive than one of these eating shacks that we get, the Czech Republic. So that's one example. And on the other hand side, we've got a more higher sophisticated restaurant, I would say, which suits very much then us as well, where we can bring clients. So this is probably a small example of that. Other than that, I think it is going more and more in the direction that you say, that the buildings are being used in a different way. It's funny that you mentioned hospitality, because in our world, we don't call ourselves a real estate group anymore. We call ourselves a real estate and hospitality group. So this is exactly in the logic that you just mentioned.
What a welcoming group you are. That's
Thank you very much. You want another coffee?
No, lovely. I'll have a donut. While I still can. Kai, one of the other
shows
things.
me you can.
One of the other things, Kai, and I think I'll be interested to get your perspective from outside of the real estate world in a way. Is there's obviously a large drive for human capital, especially, and I think artificial intelligence will also begin to drive that more in terms of getting the right people that you want. Certainly, a lot of the things that we've been doing with cities have all been about how you create a livable city, and the investment part of that is in creating a livable city. Part of that is getting the right mix of human capital, making it a sustainable investment. What role do you see in technology playing a part of that? And in also, and linking this to the building side, we've obviously got areas where if Google or Apple set up a great new office, suddenly that district becomes much more interesting. What's your sense of it in terms of the cities, how technology is playing a role in making them a more attractive place?
I think it's a demand and supply actually. So yes, where we have this innovation hubs being set up, people are more advanced, the user are more advanced. So that's really the demand actually, where people are driven actually. So I think good examples are with Luxembourg, you can see many techies over here, even a small group, but many techies coming to this side. Same with Berlin, same with London actually, where all these apps, the demand is just coming because the people want these services actually, be it even for the property, be it related to on-demand services, such as I want a parking right now, right? So there is an adoption index as well actually, right? So you need a parking, I can look in the app and find a parking which is available on a shared economy basis, and I can find that actually. Now, that's the demand side. Now on the supply side, again, you need to be innovative. You need to have those sensors. You need to have the Bluetooth beacons, installed, which can sense, there is a parking on demand. Actually, how do you cater to that? Actually, So it's a mix of both, which is required, where you have the demand, but also the supply side of it actually, and innovation.
Okay, good.
I would say that you mentioned the parking. It's quite intriguing to me because when you think about self-driving cars and sharing economy, I'm really curious about what our city is going to be look like in 10, 15 or 50 years. I'm not really sure, because people now own a car.
Mm-hmm.
You need a place to park your car. But why would we own a car? Why don't we just share cars and just sign up for a service that will bring you from A to B when you need it?
Yep.
And those cars will be on the move at all times. So it's no use in parking a car and putting it away in a garage for the rest of the day while you're working. Put the car to move and let all cars be moving at the same time, at the same speed. You don't have traffic jams like you quite often have over here in Luxembourg. I'm quite often over here, and it's quite awful to get to the places in the morning over here. So I think it's going to be, the technological innovation is going to be a huge influence on cities. Because if you don't need parking spaces anymore, look how many space you more have in cities to develop things for more livable surroundings, or might be different buildings, or I'm not really sure where we're going, but I think it's quite intriguing what's going to be happening in the coming years.
You already see it. A lot of cities, they say, okay, stop using your car in the center or in that and that street. So that could be the first step. There is also a discussion about the parking with the layers. You say, okay, will that be the next energy fabrics of the future? Because when you use that parking, you can load or give it back to the system, because there you can switch. So that's also a very interesting thing, and it's possible. It's made by technology that makes it possible. So it's interesting, and of course you can have smart mobility around it. Make other connections to bring in food, so the center will be nice, more green, because there is a lot of pollution. We know that already. So hopefully the electric cars will bring the next bright decade.
And Ajay, what's your sense of timing for these things, like all electric cars, lorries, changing that sort of transportation? Because it obviously has very big impacts potentially on the logistics side, but also on, from a real estate perspective, things like shopping centres, which dedicate huge amounts of their land to parking because they have to. What's the timing of that? Are we looking at 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
At least I think 5 years. And it's funny, I was talking to one of the clients actually who owns a Tesla, and he got a BMW iDrive. And what was funny is, like, the plugs are different actually. Oh, plugs are same, but it doesn't recharge. So it's the same Android Apple problem, that you have a parking space where you can recharge, and this is going to be a main differential advantage for these car makers now, is how do you recharge your cars actually. So everybody is like, okay, no compatibility. This is Teslas and this is BMWs actually, because who invests in the money is going to take up the market share actually, right? So I think, like, it's a question of, like, how, again, the whole ecosystem of real estate assets, which are including parking, charging points, are being deployed by the companies or startups. And once you have that, people are more ready to use that. I think that by technology it's ready. It's a question of having the charging points and the ecosystem.
Okay, good. And one of the things, particularly in the logistics side, is also, at the moment, a lot of the logistics hubs are decided on the hours that a driver can drive. But obviously, if it's no longer the hours that a driver can drive, but it becomes the length of battery life, then that changes where logistics hubs need to be and things like that. There's also, I know Prologis were looking at, I was talking to them, that they were looking at some project, not that they were doing, but that where you'd got an idea to cover the surfaces of roads so that it becomes a bit like Scale Extra in a way, is that's taking solar power and feeding it directly into the car as the car or lorry moves along. So I'm sure there will be solutions to it.
But it's also, I think, it's the battery. That's one thing. But also a smart solution. I'm a mentor for a startup, Quick Cargo, for trucks, and they can say, okay, my truck is half empty, and they put it on the app, and some carrier said, okay, I got some stuff, so they put it in the empty space, so you don't have empty runs, and it's better for using the roads. So it's also, I think it's battery, and we have a big challenge there, but also making smart solutions for that kind of things.
Yeah.
In Amsterdam, they use, of course, the channels to distribute the stores. So different ways.
I've got a quick question for you, because I'm conscious that time has, we could go on forever,
Yeah.
but time suggests we shouldn't. You mentioned, Jan-Willem, about that when you know, gradually as younger people come into the workplace and move up through the workplace, that is going to change things. How much do you think that's going to change the way we're delivering services, you're delivering services?
It's going to be a huge difference, because I already notice when I'm at meetings and I'm sitting with the CEO of a real estate company, and he has this young business analyst, a millennial type person sitting next to him, and they're asking completely different things at me. And there's a huge difference nowadays between the technology that we use in a personal life and that we have in business software. And you can see that those millennials are asking me typical technological innovations that they already have in the personal space but not in the workplace yet. So it's quite challenging for us to keep up with that. But I think we handle that quite well, because our focus is entirely on that source of the transaction, on the front end, on using apps. And that's not just in the workplace, that's also finding your tenants for your places, whether it's residential or it's offices. It's a different way of looking for office space. A millennial is in no way going to visit a real estate broker and ask him, well, I need 500 square meters of office space. He'll just go online. He just wants an app for it. And he wants to do it completely, entirely digitally. And he's not asking for a lease for 5 years. No, he wants maybe for 5 weeks. Maybe 5 hours a day.
That's the difference. The time, but also you go online. You don't ask a broker to visit all the buildings. You put the VR button, you look around, and you say, okay, I like this, and then you're going to visit the building. Or you play a game with AR with your iPhone X in the building, but it will change. And for me also, I say, yeah, you can Google it. And they say, yeah, but we already saw how it works on YouTube. You know, when you make your tie, I go to my father and say, okay, how do I make my tie? And they say, yeah, but we are going to learn it on YouTube. So that's also a big difference. I don't use a tie today. I know how to,
you didn't have connectivity this morning.
Yeah,
You should have asked your father.
No Wi-Fi, so no.
Sorry about that. You should have asked for the code.
And quickly, this is for you, Kai, really, which is, obviously you've got, if we've got everybody gathering these vast sources of data, data security, leaks, those kinds of things, is that going to be one of the biggest risks going forward for investors, for companies?
It is, and at least it's from a perception currently the big issue, where I don't want to give away my data if I'm not absolutely sure that it's safe. And this is probably something where time will also possibly heal some of the wounds, but and regulation obviously plays a major role as well. But every building, I mean, I was talking about this sensor earlier on in some air filter, that's obviously making the building more vulnerable as well, because that data is then available somewhere on the Wi-Fi. And when Menno wants to do his tie in the morning, maybe he cracks the Wi-Fi and says the filter needs changing, even though it does not need changing. So there's a certain risk there, cybersecurity, which is again probably a new area of profession. So Jan-Willem's daughter might, going forward, not be a property person, but be in the cybersecurity space. So where there are certain professions which are dying out going forward, there are new which are being created. Both professions and services, obviously, as well with that.
Okay, good. Tim, can I ask you a quick question? which is for somebody who's been in the real estate space for a long, long time. Do you think that a lot of the, I mean, in a way, what we're saying is that some of the transparency things will begin to make the real estate market a bit more like the equities market or the bond market, where it's much more transparent. Decisions can be made that are not based on actually going to visit a building, have a look at the surroundings. Do you buy that argument at all, or do you think that ultimately it's a piece of fixed real estate and somebody's got to have a look at it to understand what the market is locally?
As a dinosaur who's not quite extinct yet, I think there's a bit of both. I think that certainly technology is a bit overhyped. I remember 30 odd years ago, the first smart building in Brussels was the ITT Tower, and ITT moved out, and they cabled the whole thing, and this was the first cabled building in Brussels. Actually, none of the tenants who moved in ever used the cabling, because one said, well, we use a different system. We had 2 or 3 floors went to actually part of the American embassy to NATO, and they said, gosh, somebody could be hacking into this. So it's we've been living with technology actually for much longer than we'd like to admit. What has happened is the cost has come down. I remember managing a 150,000 square metre building that we had a Honeywell building management system, which was great, and because it was such a big building, you could justify the hardware cost, and every little thing you added was costing 300 euros or 500 euros, but because of the scale, it was justified. Now, you can have a 200 square metre house and have those gadgets for the cost of a mobile phone. But I think also coming on to the data thing, between one of the fundamental differences between Europe and the States is that the States has always had this division between the so-called brokers and the appraisers, and therefore the appraisers needed the data. They even paid for it, and you have demographics data available and so on. In Europe, you have the surveyors who are trying to do everything, and they're not sharing that data. And we need more transparency on the valuation side, and this is perhaps a regulatory issue, but some of the valuations I see sitting on boards of various companies, they're actually appalling, because they're based on almost no data. But you ask the value, oh, but that data's not available.
Oh, that's just local knowledge.
Because, yeah, but, CBRE's got a bit of it, and JLL's got another bit, but they're certainly not sharing it.
But just to add to what you mentioned, I can see a lot of platforms in that space where probably the companies are not disclosing this information, but consumers are actually. And you can do a valuation very quick, like where these platforms gives you a survey of telling you like what's your property worth, and you can put like the locations, what country, what street, and what's your energy class, and it gives you some kind of data actually. Now, I think it's 2 ways actually. When you are doing your assessment, probably they say like how many properties are getting sold, and they can build algorithms on top of that and say like, okay, based on historical data and what is not being disclosed by the company but like by the consumers, like these are the valuations. And I think this is where you have another source of data which is coming up, which is consumers actually, which was not there before.
Okay.
Maybe from one audit perspective, sharing data is fine, but sharing trustworthy data is very good. So that's real boundary we have to work on, and this is maybe the work that we're doing every day at EY. But the thing is that sharing data in the US is one thing, but again, we have lots of different third-party assessments with in the green area or in the valuation area, and those guys are doing their job as well. So just to make sure that when we are sharing information on TripAdvisor, it doesn't mean that if we have thousands of information, it gives the real picture of it. We need somehow a kind of filter analysis of the data. So maybe having less but better. So I think it could be a kind of tempering from your perspective.
Who would you say is better in filtering that data? A machine or a human?
Probably both. Probably both, because then filtering the data means that you are assessing the value and the quality of this data. So we can use robotics just to share and see from the different perspectives if you can, let's say, compare, if you can make sure that one source of data is matching with the other source, and this is basically your job, just to make this, to enable the companies to make this interconnection. And on the top of that, I guess that we are just as well quite useful as human beings, and not only relying on robots. We need to step back a bit and make sure that, for instance, the value of a property is probably based on the location and not only about the services. And like Ritz, the famous hotel owner, was just saying that for investment in hotels, you have just to think about location, location, location. So making sure that we're just getting the big picture of it and filtering, analyzing the data, and make the smart use of the data instead of just relying on something automatically and sharing just the information through the different new platforms, I guess.
Okay, good. To keep us on time, I've got one last question, which is really kind of about the most things that are going to be influential and who's the winners and losers. I mean, if it's a revolution, like the French Revolution, that means some people are going to face the guillotine and some will rise up. So who's going to face the guillotine and who's going to rise up? Who's going to be the winners and losers? Let's start with you, and then you've got the more difficult chance of being at the end, Kai. Yeah, Menno.
I think ultimately the dinosaurs will be the losers. And I think when you look at, I'm sorry, but that's a personal opinion. But I think people who will be standing still are going to be the losers in the next coming years. So what Menno told us about the 50% of property managers making more profit, not just from the property management task, but from the services perspective. I think there's going to be a huge shakeout in the property management business in the next coming years. And if you do not enter the next phase, you're going to be a big loser.
Okay, good. Ajay.
Yeah, for me, I think any disruption impacts the middlemen. So middlemen will be, the losers, and the consumer will be the winners actually, because they get the best out of it actually.
Okay, good. Menno.
Yeah, the hunt will be on the user and the customer. So when you have customer data and you can engage the user, the clients, and you own something, you will be the winner. But if you stand still, you say, yeah, it will be fine and everything will be good. When you don't adapt, when you don't looking for interaction and engagement, you're gone.
Let's end on a positive note, Kai. Who's going to be the winner?
I believe we talked a lot. Everybody's a winner. Everybody who's here today is a winner. Right? No. Yeah. We talked a lot about data, and I don't think it's necessarily a matter of who owns what type of data, who's going to share what type of data. The ones are going to be winners that do the right thing with that data. And that's, I think, a key message. Now, who's going to be loser? Well, probably all the others, plus those who stand still. But this is something that all the other gentlemen have shared as well. So that's nothing new, I guess.
I think the winner is going to be the one who has the best CX, the best customer experience, utilizing the data that's going to be available and more widely available in the next coming years. That's absolutely going to be the winner. Yeah.